think my grandchildren shared with me, so that's to be expected. You know, to bring us to where we are in our study, to go back what you've already studied before, even before I came. You remember when the children of Israel entered the promised land, the land that God had promised to them, crossed over the Jordan River, and they conquered the land. God gave it to them. They went through a period of what is known as judges. The king was God. God was their king. And God had given them the law, His word that they were to follow. The priests were the ones that were to teach that law, and they were to live by that. And there were not only just religious laws, laws about worship, but there were laws, civil laws, laws about nation, a nation of people. But they would then forsake that law, go into idolatry, commit sin. God would then bring a nation up against them to oppress them. They would then cry out to God, repent and turn to God and cry out for deliverance. And God would send them a deliverer known as a judge. And that cycle happened over and over again during the period of Judges. And then you come to the days of Samuel, the last judge, and they saw the sons of Samuel, and the sons of Samuel were wicked. And so they wanted to be like all the nations around about them, and they wanted Samuel to give them a king. And of course, God did not want them to have a king. Matter of fact, God was their king, and them wanting to have a king, they were rejecting God as their king. But God allowed them to have a king. And so this is the beginning of what is known as the United Kingdom. So after the period of Judges came then the United Kingdom. And who was the first king of the United Kingdom?
Saul.
Saul. And how many years did he reign? 40 years. And then after Saul, God set up whom? David as his king, and he reigned for 40 years. And then David's son Solomon became king, and he reigned for 40 years.
Why is it 40?
I don't know. It's just that's the way it happened. They all reigned for 40 years. And then, because of sins that Solomon really brought into the land, he married foreign women, allowed idolatry to come into the land. God said that in the days of Rehoboam, his son, that the kingdom would be divided. So in the days of Rehoboam, the kingdom divided, you remember. And then set up Jeroboam as the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes. And then he set up Rehoboam was the king of the southern kingdom of Judah. And but God had told David that all of the kings would be from your sons, and that was true during the days of during the southern kingdom of Judah. All the kings would be of the lineage of David, not of the northern kingdom of Israel. They were different kings of different lineages and different regimes. So that's what we've been studying, is the divided kingdom from the time that the kingdom divided in the days of Rehoboam. And we're continuing to study that, almost coming to the end of it. And the end of the divided kingdom is when Israel, the northern kingdom, is carried away into captivity by the Assyrians. And we're getting pretty close to that period in our study. So these are the kings right now that we've been studying. We studied just recently, last week, we studied Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, and Pekah, the kings of Israel. Remember, all the kings of Israel are evil. And you see this line here indicates a change in regime. Shallum conspired against Zechariah and killed him. Of course, this was the last king of Jehu's. Is that right? Jehu's children who reigned as king over Israel. And he only reigned for a month because Menahem killed him and set up his kingdom, and he reigned for 10 years. His son Pekahiah reigned, and he reigned for only 2 years, but then Pekah conspired against him, killed him, and then he became king. But during this time here, after Jeroboam II, who was the father of Zechariah, They had gained some power at that time, but since then, the kingdom has declined rapidly. And they're losing a lot of their territory, their land, and that's what's happening in Israel. The question is, what is happening in Judah? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the reign of Jotham, who began to reign, I think, in the second year of Pekah, the king of Israel. And that's one of the questions we're going to be looking at. Is what was happening in Judah during this period of time. Now, you remember I mentioned a couple of principles that we've been learning in our study of the divided kingdom, and one of them is those who are with God, that nation or that would turn to God and obey Him, or that king who would lead the nation, try to lead the nation in obeying God, God was with them. But if they did not do that, God was not with them. Remember what He said to King Asa through the prophet Azariah there in 2 Chronicles 15. In verse 2 it says, "Hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you while you are with Him. If you seek Him, He will be found by you. But if you forsake Him, He will forsake you." And we have found this principle being played out over and over and over and over again in our study of the divided kingdom. And we're going to see that even this evening. Now, the questions in your workbook, the first one is, and I'm going to just go through this by looking at the questions. As things are getting worse and worse in Israel, the northern kingdom, what is going on in Judah? How did you answer that?
Well, they were doing what God wanted, but they didn't remove all the high places. They still sacrificed in them.
And John defines this very well. Jotham was good and was leading them in a good way.
Yeah.
But the people were not. They still went and offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places. So Jotham is a good king. He does what is right in the sight of the Lord, but the people still acted corruptly. It says in verse 2 of 2 Chronicles 27. I tell you what, let's read, first of all, 2 Chronicles 27. Let's read that whole chapter. I should have done that before we started the questioning.
27?
Yeah, chapter 27. It's only 9 verses in this chapter of 2 Chronicles 27. And John, read verses 1 through 5, if you would. And then after that, Lee, if you would read verses 6 through 9. Okay, John?
Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzzah had done. But unlike him, he did not enter the temple of the Lord. The people, however, continued their corrupt practices. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord and did extensive work on the wall at the hill of Ephraim. He built towns in the hill country of Judah and forts and towers in the wooded areas. Jotham waged war against the king of the Amorites and conquered them. The year the Amorites paid him 100 talents of silver, 10,000 cores of wheat, and 10,000 cores of barley. The Amorites brought him the same amount also in the second and third years.
So Jotham strengthened his position because he did not waver in obeying the Lord his God. As for the rest of the events of Jotham's reign, along with all his wars and his ways, note that they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. Jotham rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. His son Ahaz became king in his place.
All right, thank you. All right, so it says here that he did what was good He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. But the people still acted corruptly. In 2 Kings 15, it states in verse 35 that the high places were not removed. What else does it say that he did in this passage?
He rebuilt some stuff.
Yeah, he continued the fortifying of Jerusalem that his father Uzziah had done. And you can go back to 2 Chronicles 26. We're not going to take the time to read that, where Uzziah had done some rebuilding in Jerusalem, fortifying of Jerusalem. And he did that. But it also says in verse 4 here of chapter 27 that he built cities in the mountains of Judah. And he continued his father's building to protect the herds. In verse 4, it says he built fortresses and towers in the forest. It says he built fortresses and towers. And when you look in 2 Chronicles 26 and verse 10, his father were building towers in the fields, evidently to protect their crops, their herds. And so this indicates prosperity. This indicates power. Not only that, what is, well, this is not stated. It does say here in verse 5. Who else did he fight against?
Amorites.
Yeah, or the Ammonites.
Ammonites.
Yeah, there were the Amorites, but this is the Ammonites. He
Yeah.
fought with the Ammonites and defeated them. And the Ammonites gave them tribute. Notice the amount of tribute that was given to Jotham. It gave him in that year 100 talents of silver, 10,000 cores of wheat, and 10,000 of barley. The people of Ammon paid this to him in the second and third years also. For 3 consecutive years, it seems that the Ammonites gave him this tribute. Now, if you notice where the Ammonites are located, they were on the eastern side of the land, on the edge of the desert. The desert goes out this way. And the Ammonites would have always wanted the more fertile land, which was in Gilead here, which is where Israel dwelt. And throughout the history of Israel, you find they had trouble with the Ammonites. And here again, encroached upon them. Now, during the days of Uzziah, you can go back to 2 Chronicles 26 and verse 8. Just look at verses 26 and chapter 26 and verse 8. It says also the Ammonites brought tribute to Uzziah. That's the father of Jotham. His fame spread as far as the entrance of Egypt, for he became exceedingly strong. I'm talking about Uzziah. But the Ammonites brought tribute to him. Probably what happened is when Jotham became king, the Ammonites stopped sending the tribute. So what Jotham did, it says he fought with the king of the Ammonites. He went out to fight against them to regain this tribute, which he did, and he won. He was able to be successful.
There's something I've noticed here that I hadn't noticed before. Whenever the king of Judah or the king of Israel died, it would say, it was written that whatever they did was written in the books of Judah or Israel. Here it says it's written in both countries.
In the book of the kings of Israel and Judah.
Yeah.
You know, when you read in 2 Kings, it says that they were written in the Chronicles of the Kings. And then in 2 Chronicles, it says they were written in the book of the Kings.
Yeah.
Now, some might think, well, what 2 Kings is talking about is the book of 2 Chronicles, and what 2 Chronicles is talking about is the book of 2 Kings. And that's not really true. Evidently, they had a record that we don't have a record of now. We don't have it it's not given, where they wrote down the affairs of these kings. And that's, I think, what it's referring to. And these are not necessarily inspired books. They're not books that were written by spirit-guided men, but they did have the records of the account of
How
these
they keep
kings.
records? Was it like people writing down their stories while they talked to them?
Yeah, well, just whenever an event would take place, they would then keep a record of it.
Okay.
And so we do that today too. You know, there's those who keep records of the various national affairs, and they had that as well. But I want you to notice, I wanted you to look for those statements that indicated that if they followed God, then God was with them. If they did not follow God, God was not with them. Do you see that here in this chapter? Anybody see it? It's there. Look at verse 6. So Jotham became mighty. Why?
Because he ordered his ways before the Lord his God.
That's right. He ordered his ways before the Lord his God. He prepared, he did God, he sought God. And when he did that, then he became mighty. God was with him. And that's the reason that there was a difference between what was taking place in Judah and what was taking place in Israel at this time. Israel was declining rapidly, but you had a good king in Judah, and so God was with them. Now, the people were corrupt, so it's not everything just right, but because Jotham the king sought God, then God did bless them at this time. All right, the next question is what began to happen during the reign of Jotham. Now this is not in 2 Chronicles 27, it's in 2 Kings 15, verses 32 to the end of the chapter. Turn over to 2 Kings chapter 15.
There's like abominations that happened.
Well, not a sinful thing,
Okay.
but something that was
Good.
brought upon them.
Okay.
Rezin, the king of Syria.
Yeah, verse 37 of 2 Kings 15. And in those days the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, against Judah. So even during the days, no doubt, of Jotham, that God had now begun to send these two kings against Judah even. Because the way it states, it says, the Lord began to send. Now, who is Rezin? He's the king of what?
Syria.
Syria. Some may say Ammon, or
Aram.
Armenians, the Armenians. That depends upon your translation. They are the Syrians, Syrians. And remember the capital city of the Syrians, or Arameans? The capital city was
Was it Damascus?
Damascus, which is right here. There's Damascus. And of course, they've had dealings with the Syrians and trouble with the Syrians for a long time. But now Rezin is the king, and God is sending him against Judah. And also Pekah, the son of Remaliah, that's the king of Israel. So evidently, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and Rezin, the king of Syria, his ally, they become allies, and they're coming against Judah. We're going to talk more about this next week as we talk about the king Ahaz. We're talking a little bit about Ahaz tonight, which is the son of Jotham. But we're going to talk about that alliance between Rezin and Pekah, and they're coming against Judah. And why were they coming against Judah? And now let me just give you a preview of that, is that I think what was happening is they were wanting Judah to ally with them to fight against Assyria. The Assyrians were the great power. Tiglath-Pileser had become the king of Assyria, and it made them a world power, and they were going to be moving in this direction. And I think, and they were already starting to move.
So they try to fight them to gain support.
You're talking about Rezin and Pekah. They were going to fight them to protect themselves against Assyria. They didn't want Assyria to come and take their land. And so they were, I think, working together for that purpose. And especially when Ahaz becomes king, I think they're trying to get Ahaz to ally with them. Ahaz won't do it. We'll talk more about that next week. But here is the beginning of where God is sending these men against Judah. All right, the next question, number 3, is what do we see in Jotham that we have not seen from most of the other kings of Judah? And when I read that question, I thought, now what are they referring to? There's no specific statement that I see, but then I said, oh, that's what they're thinking. So you had to do a little thinking here. When you look at most of the other kings of Judah, I would say most of the other good kings of Judah. Now, this is what I think he's talking about. You may have something different than what the writer of the question had in mind. I don't know. What did you think he was talking about?
I just said that he became mighty because he prepared, that statement that we saw earlier, he became mighty because he prepared his ways before the Lord his God. I don't know if it always says that the kings became mighty.
Well, Uzziah, his father, became extremely strong. So it does state that about him, but that might be what the writer had in mind, that this was not stated of most of them.
Well, it does mention that he did rebuild the gates of the temple, and I don't recall the other kings even doing anything to the temple.
Well, yes, he does mention Jotham. See, back in verse 3 of chapter 27 of 2 Chronicles, he built the upper gate of the house of the Lord. I think Uzziah may have done some of that as well. I do know that Joash had repaired the temple, done, I think, a lot of repairing in the temple. Okay.
Some of the kings were not buried with the kings, but I think most of them were, and he was.
Yeah, so I don't think that would be what he's talking about, being buried with kings.
Is it his acts that he did for God, they're not written down?
He did what?
He did acts for God, but they're not written down. Like, is that what he did?
Acts for God?
Yeah.
Well, it does say that he sought God. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord, which means he was striving to do what was the Lord's will. I think what it is, and if this is what he had in mind, I think I would have reworded the question, is that we do not see Jotham incurring guilt by falling into idolatry or by outright disobedience to God's laws of worship. Even the good kings of Judah, most of them did do something wrong. And just got a list here. These are the good kings of Judah. Asa, what did he do? He relied on the king of Syria rather than on the Lord when Baasha, the king of Israel, came up against Judah. Now, God had helped him to defeat, I think it was the Ammonites. But now when Baasha comes, who does he seek help from? The king of Syria. Now, he was a good king, but here he's showing a lack of faith in God. Jehoshaphat was a really good king. But what did he do? You remember he allied himself with Ahab by marriage, but also went out to war with Ahab, to war against others. And also with Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, king of Israel. The Lord, that was one of the failures of Jehoshaphat. Joash, he did good as long as Jehoiada was alive, but after Jehoiada died, he turned to idolatry. Amaziah, after the slaughter of the Edomites, he brought the gods of the Edomites and set them up to be his gods. Also, Uzziah, the father of Jotham, what did he do? You remember when he became powerful, he went into the temple as a priest to offer the incense, and he got leprosy. But we do not see Jotham incurring guilt by falling into idolatry or by outright disobedience by God's laws, against disobeying God's laws concerning worship, as his father Uzziah did. You don't see any of that. And so that seems to be maybe what he's talking about with this question. That's not one thing we see concerning Jotham that we do see as a result in the lives of many of the other kings of Judah. Okay, question number 4 is, what did he fail to do?
He didn't honor and go in the temple.
Take down all the
That's the way he should
high
have.
places and alternate places to worship.
Yeah. And when it says what did he fail to do, which indicates probably it's something he should have done.
You do not enter the temple.
And what's that?
You do not enter the temple of the Lord.
Yeah, he didn't do that. That's what Mary Lee was saying, that he didn't do what his father Uzziah had done in entering into the temple, which would have been a good thing. That wouldn't have been something he failed to do. That would have been something he was a good thing. So the thing that he failed to do was what, Seth, I think you mentioned, he didn't remove the high places. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. We talked about that several weeks ago, what the high places. I think these were high places where they would go and offer worship to the one true God, which the Lord did not legislate, did not authorize, but they still would do that rather than going to the temple. They should have been going to the temple, but many of them would do their worship in these high places. And a lot of these good kings did not take that away. The people still did it. They probably told them don't, but they did it anyway. Probably what happened. And they didn't prevent them from doing it. Now, we're going to see when we get into the study of Ahaz, where there were high places where they worshiped other gods. And so that was something that they did as well. I think these high places are probably talking about the burning incense on the high places, which was worship to the true God. Number 5, how is Ahaz's reign described? Okay, after Jotham reigns for 16 years, then his son Ahaz becomes king. But let's read 2 Chronicles 28. Let's have someone read verses 1 through 4. 2 Chronicles 28, verses 1 through 4. Tommy, would you read that, please? Hinnom. Yeah. All right, turn over to 2 Kings chapter 16, and let's read verses, 16, verses 1 through 4. 2 Kings 16, 1 through 4. Jane, would you read that, please? All right. So list some of the things that Ahaz did that would describe his reign. Yeah, it doesn't mention Molech here, but that's right. It was, in times that was a sacrifice made to the god of Molech. Yeah, and this is the first time we read of a king doing that in Israel. Offering their children in sacrifice to the gods. And it was done in the valley of the son of Hinnom. The first time we read of them doing it in that valley. Remember the Greek term Gehenna? That's the Greek word for, Seth, do you remember? Well, it's the word for hell. That's the Greek word for hell in the New Testament. And that's where, in the days of Christ, evidently there was this, that's where they dumped their garbage and they burned fire. They burned the garbage and there was the fire there. And Jesus used that term. But it comes from this valley of Hinnom, where this is where they begin to offer sacrifices to false gods and even the burning of their children in fire to these false gods. And it's according to the abomination of the nations around the mountain that God had driven out of the land. Now Ahaz was bringing it into the land, even into Jerusalem itself, and offering these sacrifices. It also mentions he made molten images for the Baals. That's in verse 2. He walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. And what else is mentioned there? Yeah, now this would be the high places where they evidently did offer sacrifices to false gods, because they burned incense on the high places, on the hills, and under every green tree, which indicates something they did to false gods. One thing we're going to learn, we're going to talk more about Ahaz next time, but it seems that Ahaz had an abhorrence for Jehovah God. He is one that just would not do anything in worship to the true and living God. And I don't know why. I don't know all the reasons. Have you ever known of somebody, maybe how they were raised, and they became so angry toward maybe a particular religion, they would say, I would never become a part of that group. I would never believe what they believe. You've had people who are members of the Churches of Christ and say, well, I'll never be a member, because of bad experiences they had. And it doesn't matter. And there are people who view that about maybe belief in Jesus. They're not going to have anything to do with that because of these bad experiences. Ahaz was one where God gave him opportunities to come to him, and he just would not do it, never would, when it didn't make sense. We'll talk more about this next time, but we see his wickedness. He was one of the most wicked kings, Israel or Judah, in the land. Now we'll find another wicked one that's even worse. That's Manasseh later. But Ahaz was a very wicked king. The next question is, did Ahaz adopt Israel's sins because Israel was so successful? Why did he get the gods of Israel adopt what the northern kingdom had done in worshiping of the Baals? Did he know what had happened to Ahab and Jezebel? And yeah, he just did not want to have anything to do with the true and living God. It was not because it was successful. There were failures there. Remember the principle that we have learned in all of the our study of these kings: if you seek God and do His will, He'll bless you. If you don't, you're going to be punished. He was the king of Judah. try to remove his image? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like he experimented with several different gods, and it was not even true God. No, Israel was in decline. Remember Menahem, king, which was in Israel earlier, he paid tribute to the king of Assyria. Look in chapter 2 Kings 15 in verse 19. It says, Pul, king of Assyria, that's Tiglath-Pileser, came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him to strengthen the kingdom under his control. So God was delivering him into the hand of the Assyrians. And also, the days of Pekah, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took many of the northern cities of Israel and carried them captive to Assyria. In verse 29 of chapter 15. The days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth-Maacah, Genoa, Kadesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. We talked about this last week. A good bit of the northern part of Israel, where these cities were, where now is Galilee, where Naphtali was, that was carried away. And even on the eastern side of the Jordan, Gilead, a lot of that was carried away by Assyria. Assyria, the capital city of Assyria was Nineveh, which is further north and east of that land. And they were becoming the great power. So that's what had happened in Israel. So why in the world would Ahaz then adopt their gods, their practices, do what is according to the nation of Israel when it was not? They were not being successful in that. Doesn't make any sense. Question number 7 is, what did Amaziah do? And this is the point the writer of these questions, I think, is wanting us to see. What did Amaziah do after he returned from defeating the Edomites? Now, this was king of Judah back in chapter 25. And I mentioned this earlier, how that a good king, which Amaziah was, but here at this time, when he returned from defeating the Edomites, someone read in chapter 25 of 2 Chronicles, verses 14 and 15.
After Amaziah came from striking down the Edomites, he brought the gods of the men of Seir and set them up as gods and worshipped them, making offerings to them. Therefore the Lord was angry with Amaziah and sent him a prophet who said to him, "Why have you sought the gods of a people who did not deliver their own people from your hand?"
Yeah. So here is a prophet saying, why would you seek the gods of the people who didn't rescue them? Their gods didn't help them. Why would you take their gods? I think that's the reason that we know Ahaz later does that.
I think Ahaz also did it because of money, though.
Maybe money, yeah. It's not because of what is the true God and what is evidence for the true God. It's all based on what they want to do rather than what is reasonable. And so he brought the gods of the Edomites to set them up to be his gods and worship them. Well, how does Amaziah's actions relate to what Ahaz did in adopting the ways of Israel and the nations of the land?
He did the same thing.
Did the same thing. It doesn't make any sense. Look in chapter 28, and we're going to get to this next week. In 2 Chronicles 28, look at verses 22 and 23. This is what now Ahaz does later. It says, now in the time of his distress, King Ahaz became increasingly unfaithful to the Lord. In his distress, he becomes increasingly unfaithful to the Lord who could help him. This is that King Ahaz, for he sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, which had defeated him, saying, because the gods of the kings of Syria helped them, I will sacrifice to them that they may help me. But they were the ruin of him and of all Israel. You know, it just doesn't make any sense that he would take the gods of Damascus, who had didn't help them, but he says they did help them. Maybe they'll help me. And but they became his ruin, the ruin of Israel. So keep in mind here at this time that Syria is here, Damascus is the capital, or the Arameans, and then here's Israel, but Assyria has already come and taken some of this land here. The northern part of the land, matter of fact, the cities that are listed that I mentioned earlier, Ijon, Abel Beth Maacah, Kadesh, these are cities that were taken, but he mentions Naphtali, Galilee, Gilead. And so this was taken by Assyria. That's what had happened to Israel. And now Ahaz becoming the king of Judah. And God had made them mighty in the days of his father Jotham because he sought God. They became powerful. There was riches there. And now he's turning his back on the true and living God. And we're going to see a considerable downfall in Judah as well at this time, in the days of Ahaz. And that's what we'll talk more about next time as we talk about Ahaz and his dealings with Pekah, the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, and Rezin, the king of Syria. They ally together. They come against Ahaz. I'd like for you to read the of course, accounts that are given in your book and to do the questions. But Isaiah also talks about Ahaz. Matter of fact, you have one of the references, Isaiah chapter 7. Make sure you read what is stated in Isaiah. Isaiah began to prophesy in the last year of King Uzziah, who is the father of Jotham. So Isaiah began to prophesy in the latter part of Jotham's reign, his last year, and then he continued to prophesy during the reigns of Jotham, Ahaz, Jotham, Ahaz. I'll say, what's the next king there? Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. That's it. Hezekiah is the next king. Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz. I'm sorry. I think I said this last of Jotham. It was the last year of Uzziah. Isaiah began to reign. I hope I haven't confused you, but it's the last year of Uzziah when Isaiah began to reign, his prophecy. And he reigned during Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And also Micah began to prophesy during the reigns of Jotham. He prophesied during the same years that Isaiah did. Isaiah was more in the cities. He was more dealing with the politics of the land, while Micah prophesied concerning in the villages and the people, concerning the morality of the land. And but they do prophesy about similar things. And one thing you'll find in the books of Isaiah and Micah is they talk about the prosperity in those days, but they also talk about the great wickedness and the evil and the corruption that was among the people in those days as well. And God was going to be with them. Matter of fact, he gave opportunities to Ahaz, but Ahaz doesn't turn to God. We'll talk more about that next time. Okay, questions or comments about anything we talked about, Jane?
You know, when the kings go after the idols that they defeated and so on, you know, if we look around at people living their lives and the emptiness and the of their lives, like the famous actors and actresses and how many marriages they have and all the problems that they have and sometimes, you know, people choosing to go that direction, it doesn't make any sense.
That's right.
So it's kind of like going after what you know doesn't work.
That's a good application of this, is that we do the same thing. And you see it over and over again in the lives of people where they should know better, but they continue to do the wrong thing.
But isn't that what Jesus died for us in now? Because like
That's right.
they just didn't have that benefit now. Because I think this is just God showing us how easy it is to fall back into temptation. Because if a king can do that, then who am I not to do that? But like, you know, I guess he was just giving us an eye opener, because he, like, I think was it Ahaz, where it's like he was still right in God's eye, but he wasn't loyal at heart, you know. So it's like he's telling us that you can still do things righteous in my eyes, but if you don't have me in your heart, then you will still lose at the end. You know? That's what I receive.
You know, the blood of Jesus flows backwards as well as forwards. So anybody that was forgiven of their sins during this time, they were forgiven by the blood of Jesus. God expected them to live by faith even here. And their faith toward God meant that they would seek Him as Jotham did. And those who did not have faith, they would do what then Ahaz did. They would then reject him. That same God today, we have the blood of Jesus, but the blood of Jesus does not give us license to sin any more than it did in that day. And what He calls upon us to do is do the very same thing, is to seek God, obey His laws, and He'll be with us, He'll forgive us, and He'll be with us through the ups and downs of life. And we need to learn that and realize, even though I might think that this is what's going to make my life better, people seem to be enjoying themselves in sin, things are going good for them, it's only temporary. In the long run, those who maybe are willing to suffer for a time in order to serve the Lord, things are going to be better for them. It always will turn out that way, if we'll just remain faithful and continue to show our faith by putting God first in our life and obey Him. Okay. Thank you so much for your kind attention and participation tonight.